Shabbat Shalom. At this time, to hear from our first speaker, the great Kahan, Betziel Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh for His great house. You may be seated. Those deacons who spoke before me gave a great introduction to what I'd like to cover today, which is value. What is it has true value and lasting value in the world today? We see all the turmoil and the troubles and the devaluation of life and the wars and everything going on. So what has true and lasting value? Is it in a great appearance, a great intellect? Someone's smart. He's smart, she's smart. A social status, popularity. Well, Hollywood would like you to think that because it makes them money. Religions would like you to think that some of those things because it increases their numbers. But think about it. Who would be interested in deceiving you about your value in life? Isn't that what Satan wants? You know, cleaning that septic line may have seemed like a small thing to the person who knew how to do it, but to the person who benefited from it, that was a great value. And Pastor gives us small jobs to do. And I would hope that we would never devalue those small jobs. You know, not stealing a pencil is very valuable. Practicing patience and long-suffering is very valuable. You young people today, I'd like you to listen very carefully, because everyone here has value, even the smallest things you do, like attending a class, listening to instruction, being respectful. All of these things have value, and don't ever let the world devalue these seemingly small things that we do. When a person doesn't want to follow instruction or submit to authority, then they just start devaluing what that authority in their mind. So this is why I want to speak today on this topic of value. Your true value as an individual is found in the peace that Yahweh offers at His house. So get this point, young and old alike. Those who are weak and infirmed, those who are young and energetic and lively, all of you have value. And we're going to see where that true value comes from. I'm going to cover 2 points here to begin with. First of all, what is value? It can be defined as something desirable, worthy of esteem. Now remember in our studies about respect, means to show care and concern for everyone and everything, including yourself. Reading from the Respect Unit, page 7 of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, it says, respect for people begins by realizing that everyone, including yourself, has value. Appreciating yourself begins when you realize that you are a unique person, meaning that there's only one of you. And if you weren't there, you'd be missed. With many ideas and qualities that can be beneficial to your life and to others. This is called self-respect. People who have self-respect that is based on true morals can develop a positive character and make decisions that will keep them safe and healthy. So you see that value is something that you don't just come with automatically. You come with a little because we do value our children when they're born. But value is something that can be developed in your life. Continuing to read from the Respect Unit, recognizing your value as an individual should never be confused with being conceited. That it means thinking too much of yourself. Appreciating your value simply means to acknowledge your talents and potential. And your potential means those things that you can do, and you can even improve on them. And we do this when we're given instruction, and we follow it, and then we work on it and apply effort to improve. Recognizing your value leads to self-respect. People who have self-respect are more likely to avoid risk-taking behavior, which we see a lot of in the world today, and they do not succumb to negative pressure and influences. Now, if this is a quality that we can instill in our people, in our children especially, you can see what a benefit this would be to everyone. Don't let negative influences devalue the small things that you do, like the serving that we do in the House of Yahweh, guarding, keeping a rule. The world wants you to look at these things and say, oh, that's nothing. Volunteering. Oh, what is it that you people do over there? Attending a class or gardening, running an errand, guarding yourself from defilement. Oh, you don't need those gloves. Don't worry about that. How important. You have solid scientific evidence and proof to back you up why that's important. To guard yourself from defilement. Why wear those gloves? To guard yourself when you go into the public. It's all over the news. I was thinking one this week, when you go into a place and you want to sit down, what if you took a mat and you put it down before you sat down on the seat? And in the world they go, what are you doing? That's strange. Have you ever been to a dentist? What do they do? On that little couch you lie down, that chair, they put down a piece of paper, a separation. It's to protect you from biological contamination. This has a solid scientific basis that has value to you. I'm convinced that anyone, no matter what their state of existence or their abilities, if they're willing, you can find a job, however small, that's a benefit to others. And if you can learn to appreciate that benefit and learn to enjoy serving for the blessing that it is, then that person has value and nothing can take that away from them. Praise Yahweh. We come in all different varieties. We're large, we're small, we're young, we're old, there's smart, there's dumb, there's quick, there's slow. But everyone has value, even if they themselves are an opportunity for others to serve them. Secondly, I'd like to point out that your value is diminished when you fall short in 3 areas. Now, certainly, any of the positive character traits, if you fall short, you're going to diminish your value. But I only have time for these 3 this morning, and they are education, respect, and patience. Education in the right things so you're not deceived. Respect, meaning care for yourself and others, because each of you have value. And patience, being willing to wait on Yahweh and grow with His plan. Like I've said before, put your roots in the house of Yahweh and grow with it. You see why that was a great introduction from the great deacon? Study and pay attention. A great introduction to this topic. Your value is diminished when you're deceived, when you become disrespectful, and when you become impatient. Reading from the 7th and 8th month of the 2010 prophetic word, page 14, we read, let me get to it here. Here we go. Under the headline, in changing Yahweh's laws, peace is removed from the earth. Now, these are the words of the great witness, the one who sent us, the one who's sent to teach us the difference between what is true and what is a deception, what is of true value and what needs to be cast aside as deception. The laws of Yahweh teach peace. Notice the 10 Commandments with that in mind and see how these instructions would solve a world of problems if they were taught, agreed upon, and followed. And here we have the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. And we see these laws they're laws, they're also broader principles of you shall not murder. Now, most people in their right mind would agree that that's a great thing to have. No murder, okay? And we don't want anyone coming against and tearing apart our family. Do not commit adultery. And it's great for no one to steal from me. And it's great for no one to lie against me in court or whatever, to bear false testimony. And amongst these, which we call the 10 Commandments, amongst these, here's this one that says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And to keep it holy means to set it apart, to make it a blessing according to the laws. And above that, Yahweh says, but I will show my love. Yahweh says, I'll show my love to thousands who love me by keeping my laws. And where do we learn to do that? By first coming and keeping the Sabbath, and everything is added to that. Continuing, the 10 Commandments bring harmony. Now what's that sound like? The peaceful solution. The peaceful solution brings harmony to daily life and family activities. The peaceful solution, the 10 Commandments, all of this together brings peace and harmony to daily family activities and day-to-day living. Peace starts with honoring Yahweh by keeping His commanded Sabbath appointments in the place He has chosen to place His name, with the righteous priests who keep and teach His laws and prophecies, and there you will learn true love for each other and for Yahweh, the Heavenly Father, who desires only the best for us and for you. So you're starting to see where this true value comes from, where we can find it. This is where we find peace and true lasting value in the peace that Yahweh offers at His house. Now I'm going to take each of these, educated, patient, and respectful. I'm going to break these down. If you start turning over to Proverbs chapter 7, being educated means to have the facts. And it leads to everything beneficial if you adhere to it strictly. In Proverbs chapter 7, starting in verse 1 and 2, we read, my son, guard my words and treasure my laws within you. Keep my commandments and you will live. Keep my law, the Torah, instruction, the teaching, as the apple of your eye. That's something that is most valued. Now look over to Proverbs chapter 8, 5 through 10. O you simple, ignorant and untutored, understand wisdom. You fools, morally perverse, turning from Yahweh, be of an understanding mind. Now remember, a mind of understanding. Listen, for I will speak excellent things. I open my mouth with right things. Those are things that are truthful, spoken with understanding. For I will speak the truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth, Yahweh's laws, are righteous. This is, in Proverbs, wisdom personified, but Yahweh is the wisest of all. This is the wisdom of Yahweh. Yahweh's laws are righteous, and there's nothing froward, nothing twisted, nothing distorted, nothing perverse, nothing false or deceitful in them. Do you think that Yahweh would inspire Pastor to bring the message as the last day's witness if he didn't understand what he was teaching us? Of course he does. And there's nothing twisted or distorted or deceitful in them. They are all plain to him who understands, and right and true to them who find knowledge. This is true education. Don't devalue these things which the world despises, like the keeping of the Sabbath or keeping of a feast day. Now back in Proverbs chapter 1, we see the purpose of the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for attaining education in wisdom and moral discipline, to comprehend words of understanding, for acquiring training and discernment of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. And those are of all great value in solving what we see in the world as the problems today. And this is why we need to obtain and study and teach, learn to teach the peaceful solution and all these laws brought out in the prophetic words and the newsletters and so forth. Next, I would bring your attention to respectful, meaning to value others as important, because that makes everything worthwhile. And I found when you learn to view others for the value that they have. However small it might be, look for the value in everyone. And when we do this, we really start to appreciate one another. Turn with me over to Romans 12. In Romans 12 and verse 3, we read, "For by the unmerited mercy given to me, I say to everyone who is among you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think soberly, in accordance as Yahweh has dealt to each one the measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, and all members do not have the same function," we're given instruction. We're told to do this job or that job. And there's times when we need to work diligently at a job and then move forward and make room for those others coming behind us that need to be taught and trained. There's an opportunity for everyone in Yahweh's house. You don't have to be the boss to be a right example. Okay? Praise Yahweh. So we, being many, are one body in Messiah, and each one members belonging to another. And then in Philippians 2, 1 through 5, page 922 in your book of Yahweh. "Therefore, if there is any consolation in the Messiah, if there is any comfort in love, if any fellowship in the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, complete my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being united in one accord of one mind." And this is speaking of unity in Yahweh's house. "Let nothing be done by way of strife or empty glory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than themselves. Let every one of you look not only to your own interests, but also for the interests of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Yahshua Messiah." Now moving on to patient. Patience means to remain calm and self-controlled during setbacks. In Psalm 37, 7 through 9, I'll just read. It says to wait patiently for Yahweh, because He is in control of His plan. In this world of unrest and difficulty, trouble, everywhere we turn, everywhere we look, we really need to be grounded. And this is where we can be grounded, is waiting patiently on Yahweh and understanding that He has a plan for mankind and He is in control of His plan. In Romans 2, 6 and 7, it says, "Yahweh will reward each one according to their works. To the ones by patient persistence in doing righteousness, seek for glory, honor, and immortality, He will give eternal life." And in 1 Corinthians 13:4, he says, "Love is patient." And in Colossians 3:13, "Be patient with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, just as the Messiah forgave you, so you must forgive." And this is how we can be more patient and forgiving with one another. So we've started here seeing how education leads to everything else positive, the right education. And we've seen where we learn this right education in Yahweh's house, through the Peaceful Solution, these prophetic words and newsletters, through the teaching instruction that comes forth in the sermons from the one that Yahweh sent through His sermons, teaching and explaining these laws. And what's very important in this education that we're receiving is that we receive the facts. Getting the facts. Things we hear in the news, things that we hear from the House of Yahweh, things that we hear from others. We need to be able to determine, is this fact, is it fiction, or is it somewhere in between? So, I'm going to take you through a little process here of evaluating whether or not you've got the facts on something or not, or whether it's fiction or somewhere in between. To start off, we're going to start with this word speculation. There's a lot of speculation that goes on in this world today when something takes place. Speculation is a thought or conjecture, which means predicting from incomplete or uncertain evidence. So have we arrived at the facts yet? No. It's guessing. Another word that comes up is gossip, which we also see a lot in the media, from Hollywood gossip and so forth. This is gossip, a person who chatters or repeats idle talk and rumors, especially about private affairs of others. Chatters and idle talk. This is something we're warned against about having this kind of conversation on Yahweh's Sabbath. Rumors. Rumor means to complain, general talk not based on definite knowledge. Gossip, an unconfirmed report or statement in general circulation. The word chatter is rapid and foolish talk. And a word that's synonymous with these is hearsay, something one has heard but does not know to be true, a rumor. Once again, gossip. And foolish, like chatter, foolish talk, without right knowledge or understanding, unwise. Now, I mentioned the media. You might be able to think of others that fall into this category. Now I'm going to talk about knowledge, and we're going to hone in on what is the facts. The word know is at the base of the word knowledge and means to have a clear perception or understanding. Now, as I go through this, I want you to think about, can you think of anybody that this might apply to? Knowledge, acquainted with facts, understanding of facts, like prophetic word newsletters and the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, and the sermons. All promote an understanding of the facts, right? And they're backed up with historical evidence and references, scientific evidence, scriptural facts. It's all right there. What is evidence? Something that tends to prove something that makes another thing evident or known, like fulfilled prophecies. And proof, tried and proven to be true, established as true according to proven facts. And we just discussed that back in Proverbs 7 and 8. And then we have this in-between part, which is perception. A lot of people perceive things. They have perceptions of how a thing is. And I have learned a lot of valuable lessons. The way I perceive with my eye or hear with my ear many times is just plain wrong. And it's not yet at a fact. Perception is a mental grasp of things that are gathered by the senses. Thoughts formed in the mind from what one thinks or is aware of with or without proof. So we still need to be cautious here. Aware of, but not proven. We're made aware of many things in the House of Yahweh. Now it's up to us to put it into practice according to right instructions, and in this way we can prove these things out. Finally, we get to fact. And a fact is an actual thing that has occurred, or something that is really true. It's real. A statement supported by real result of evidence. Now, this should start reminding you of at least a few things. Like, how about the word of the laws of Yahweh? As I just covered there in Proverbs, they are true. No deception in them. When they're brought to us by the one that Yahweh sends. And we see complete knowledge being restored through Yahweh's house, and we see the fulfilled prophecies. So, has that reminded you of anything? I'd like you to take a look at something. This is the 12th month Prophetic Word Magazine. Praise Yahweh. And look what we have here. Yahweh's last days prophesied work revealed by the two witnesses. I've heard of those. Who are they anyway? The reason for mankind. Isn't that an age-old question? Wouldn't you like to know the facts? It's here. prophecies never before understood, revealed, and proven according to your scriptures. All right here. What is the scepter of righteousness? That's an interesting topic. You have to read it very careful to determine what that is. Oh, and by the way, who is this here? Why, yes. This is the one whom Yahweh has sent to teach you. And what does he teach? He teaches you the truth. And he teaches you where true values come from. He teaches you what true values are that will bring you to perfection and unity. That is where you have true value. I hope that's been a benefit to all of you, and especially the youth, because there's so many things in the world today where they want to pull you off and distract you thinking that there's value in material things and cars and the physical things and cell phones and computers and all these things, and all it serves to do is distract you from the true value that is found here in Yahweh's house. Praise Yahweh, and may Yahweh bless your understanding. If you please stand. To continue with your instruction, I'd like to present the great Michael Hawkins. Praise Yahweh.
Please be seated. Now everybody knows that the prophecies talk about there'll be great earthquakes in these last days. I'm sure you probably heard there was an 8.9 earthquake that took place off the coast of Japan. Can't remember if it was 58 to 78 miles off, but like 240 miles away from there, skyscrapers were shaking because it was such a violent thing. And then after that, of course, it caused a tsunami. It was so powerful that the largest Japanese island was moved by 8 feet. That's how big it was. Now, tsunami is when you usually think of a wave, but since it sends out a shock wave, the ocean level actually rises that amount. And these things can travel up to 500 miles per hour, by the way. And, you know, when you think about it, it traveled thousands of miles across the oceans and hit the U.S. shores. That's how powerful this thing was. Japan got hit with about over 30 feet of water, walls of water. There's a problem with a nuclear plant that's there. There's one of them that the cooling unit has failed, and so therefore it's running very hot. In fact, this morning a building exploded, and they're concerned about it because yesterday the radiation level was like 1,000 times above normal inside the control unit. And today, outside, it was this morning, it was like 8 times above normal on the outside of the building itself. So they're afraid of that. They evacuated from a 6-mile radius yesterday they updated it up to a 15-mile radius this morning. Because the normal amount of radiation that a human body usually receives in 1 year is being pumped out into the atmosphere every hour right now. So there's a fear of another Chernobyl accident that's going to take place. The possibility of it. And now, it's my great honor to present to you the one man who has all the answers to all the problems in the world, the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone! Come on, y'all can do that. Come on, come on. Come on. Praise Yahweh! It's getting close to the feast, see? We got to get louder. You may be seated. Praise Yahweh. This is a wonderful time, I think, to be alive and witnessing what Yahweh has been prophesying for thousands of years and bringing forth His plan to mankind. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I would you could have seen the younger priest this morning.
You missed out on some great stuff right there. Beautiful, beautiful sight. And their messages was great and brought well. Yes, indeed. I told you last week, I believe it was, that we were lacking on 17. I believe it was 17 nations, our countries, that we were not reaching. I was called about the middle of the week, and they said, you're going to be delighted about this. So we just got an impression from the Holy See. That's right. Went straight to the horse's mouth. So he has been warned. He got the letter, I suppose, that the witness wrote to the Pope. Praise Yahweh. So he has been warned, and he's it's up to him now whether to repent or not. The Vatican, since then, I've been shown that we've gotten 136 impressions from the Vatican since that time. So, and the count, the nations are down now, are the countries. The countries left are only 12. Yes. Out of 195 countries, we're reaching all but 12, and I think that's probably down some too. But now because our team is working hard on this, really hard, we've gotten over 11 million impressions. We've got over 3,000 requests for the two witnesses. I don't know why that would be so much on the two witnesses, but it's really rising on the two witnesses. We've got some. We're getting some great impressions. The present earthquake that we just had, this Japan's quake shifted the earth on its axis. If you'll be turning over to Isaiah, I want to show you something here. First scripture that came in mind was Isaiah 24. Where it shows Yahweh shows mankind what's causing his problems here. And of course, we're working to, that's the reason his house was established in these last days, to take his laws to the world. And from that, this is Isaiah 24, from this work right here, Yahweh shows a huge number will eventually come out of the world and flow to the house of Yahweh. The work that he's starting right here, that anyone can be a part of at this time. It's a calling to all the world at this time. Anyone can be a part of it. Just come to the house and contact the house of Yahweh, and we'll show you what Yahweh tells you to do to be a part of this last day's work that will actually stop the wars. And that's in Isaiah 2. I'm in Isaiah 24. This right here is showing you what Satan has done in Isaiah 24 to deceive mankind into turning against Yahweh, not being in unity with his house, his work, his one sent, not in unity with Abel, not in unity with Yeshua. They all had their bitches and gripes, so and their creeps, as I brought out last week. But to be a part of it, of course, you've got to be in unity with Yahweh and strive to endure as Yeshua showed. But here in this chapter, he shows you that in the first 6 verses, he shows you what mankind is doing. He shows you the great burning that is going to take place in verse 6 and nuclear war that will burn the earth severely. From what I understand now, they had a nuclear plant explode in Japan. And by the way, they were not expecting this earthquake at all. we're geared to detect those things before they ever take place. But so, this one, as big as it was, this is the biggest in history. They have upgraded it now to the largest in history. But in this earthquake, there was an explosion of a nuclear plant. I don't know if they're trying to play it down or not, but they're trying to get it under control because they say the cooling system is shut down, and if they don't get their pumps to get the cooling system shut down, then they'll be melting soon. They said, one report said the radiation was up 1,000 times more than it's supposed to be. The people there are getting enough radiation right now. The amount that they would get in a year, they're getting in 1 hour. So you can imagine what is taking place with these people. And of course, the suffering, as bad as I hate to see it, it's going to get worse. And Yahweh shows this. It will get worse. But here, the shift on the earth's axis, you can see this. It says initial results out of Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology show that the 8.9, which has been upgraded to a 9.2 or 4, I think it is now, magnitude earthquake that rattled Japan Friday shifted the Earth's rotation axis by about 25 centimeters. From what I understand, that's about 10 inches. So, and of course, imagine what's going to take place with the nuclear activity that Yahweh says is going to take place, the great nuclear burning. I'm sure glad to be a part of Yahweh's house. You will be too. I decided to change the sermons this morning, and this is a different sermon. But the protected place, I said, man, I've got to get back to that. But right here on Isaiah 24, the same one that shows same chapter that shows what is taking place, will also be what we see right here in verse 20 and what we're seeing right now in the news. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard and will sway like a hut. The transgressions in it will be heavy upon it. It will fall and not rise again. That is, it will fall and not rise again like it is right now under the leadership of man. It will be renewed, Yahweh says, by us. He says the earth's rotation will now shift at a different speed because the globe's mass has been redistributed, said Michael Bostock, a University of BC earthquake seismology professor. The researcher said that while the masses change may be completely undetectable, it still illustrates the punch behind the Japan's massive earthquake. I think it will be detectable in different ways because it's any change in the atmosphere. I remember studying any change in any planet. It doesn't make any difference what it is, and that's the reason that all the scientists are the ones that study astrology closely. They know this, and they know that the universe is run like a clock. It's everything in order, and it doesn't change, and of course Yahweh doesn't allow it to. But He is going to allow mankind to change the earth's axis, as we see here in this prophecy. And of course, they'll start finding out later. They always find out later what they don't know in advance, but it could cause a number of things, as we've already learned in our research. But he says, researchers said that while this masses, it may not be detectable right now, but it will be detectable in maybe just a few weeks now that we will see more of this. There was another one just a few minutes ago of a magnitude of 6.4. I don't think that was shown. And they're expecting more earthquakes after this because of that one earthquake that took place. Let's see. March 19th, that's I believe that's this coming week, the full moon. I wouldn't even pay any attention to this because I don't seek signs, but at the same time, I know what the Scripture shows about the moon, which is some beautiful lessons that I would like to bring one day. But I will. I'm not going to set a date. No more dates. But the moon, this March 19th, this next week, the moon will look bigger, maybe 16% larger, may look about 16% larger this time when the full moon will be closest to the earth, closest in 18 years, offering a special treat for the gazers. Well, now, like I say, if there's some of the prophecies that concern the moon, and that's what interests me, and of course the moon rules the night, and of course this is what's intriguing when you get into the prophecies on it. That's all the earthquakes before. There's none this magnitude that we had today. So that's showing what Yeshua showed. If you want to turn over to Matthew 24, what Yeshua showed in his prophecies of the last age. And I brought this out before, but let me bring it for the newcomers quickly, because in Matthew 24, Matthew, if you have a King James Version, his disciples came to him to show him in the first part of this chapter the temple. And of course, Yeshua knew the prophecies that the temple was going to be destroyed and plowed like a field, all the rocks removed. So Yeshua said, don't pay any attention to this kind of stuff. It's just from the schools of higher learning anyway. I'm throwing that in. He didn't say that right there, but he said it other places. It's all going to be destroyed. And he said there won't be a rock left here upon another, that is a stone, of this temple, which they were all removed. Then it was plowed like a field. This was the Catholics who by the way, we're getting letters of people who are saying, you brought something out that I noticed a few years ago, and because I was in the Catholic Church, and they know these things. Of course, Malachi Martin brought it out that in the Keys of This Blood that the Catholics were that their system dates back to, they call it the Aaronic priesthood. And of course, if you notice, they try to wear the kippah. It's not Yahweh saw to it that it's not the kippah that the House of Yahweh wears that was actually designed by the Scriptures. If you've read the book, The Holy Garments, they also wear the talit, but it's the scarlet red, showing all the blood that they've shed from the saints. And but if they could still be forgiven. Yahweh said that although your sins are as scarlet, you could be forgiven, but you have to humble yourself as a child, of course, come to the priest and do what the priest tell you to do. Otherwise, you won't. But here now, he shows the temple would be destroyed, and then they asked him in verse 3, the last part, about the end of the age. I brought sermons on the end of the age, so you should know what this is. If not, you can get the sermons. It's not the end of the world. It's the end of the age that Yeshua speaks of, and he calls it the last generation over here in verse 34 because it does mean generation, but it's the Hebrew word actually meant ages, so many ages from Abel to Abraham, from Abraham to to Noah to Abraham, and then Abraham to Yeshua. And then we're in the last age of where Yeshua is actually tying his coats of the donkeys. The donkeys was the 12 disciples who left the foundation of Yeshua. And this time period now is where Yeshua, Genesis 49 speaks of us, and Yeshua, Yahweh gives him the order to tie his donkey's coats. The coats are the ones, of course, that's seed of the donkeys, the foundation of the donkeys, which was the disciples, and tie them to the branch, the chosen branch, or the one that's sent. Well, here in Matthew now, he shows the earthquakes in verse 7. And then if you put it together with verse 21 and 22, you will see they're going to be bad, really bad. They won't be the normal earthquakes that we've been seeing in history, reading about in history. You can read a lot about these earthquakes in history. But since they started keeping records of them, and of course now this one, is going to shake people up just a little bit, and pardon the pun, but it has, and people are going to be going more now to the two witnesses to see where are they, where can we get some information. Nobody out here has any information. Well, of course we do have the answers, and of course just remember that no wicked person will understand. If you turn to wickedness, then your understanding is nulled, and because you're cut off. That's in Daniel 12th chapter. But this nuclear explosion and this earthquake in Japan is just the start of this thing, and it will be really, really bad, and the radiation is going to be bad. Radiation burns too. So that's part of the burning. There will be benefit to the earth, benefit to the people too, because they can be restored. Everyone that's dying, we will be able to bring them back to life, let them live 100 years and with the truth in front of them, instead of the deception that the forefathers who rebelled against Samuel, who were called elders, called prophets by Jeremiah, is over the temple, ruthless, violent men who finally decided to destroy the temple after they'd got their armies, their roaming army, which became the Holy Roman Empire, led by the Catholic Church. When they got it established in Rome and in Babylon, of course, they decided to destroy the temple completely, wanted to destroy all the works of the prophets, the foundation of the prophets and the foundation of the apostles. They wanted to destroy that, and still trying. Even today, they don't like people who read the Holy Scriptures. We have many people here who studied with the Catholics. One was studying to be a priest. He said he studied for 4 years to be a priest and never read one scripture. Well, of course, they don't want you to read the scripture. Well, now they've put out a new Bible. I guess they're wanting you to read that. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure there's some changes made again. Well, of course, they're the ones in rule now, and they sit on the 7 hills of Rome, as Revelation 17 shows. I don't know how much plainer it could get than what we've written it in Yahweh's words. But this is the last generation, the last days, and Yahweh has established His house, and He calls it a protected place. The least likely place, and you can check me out, the least likely place on the face of the earth for an earthquake to take place is where you're sitting right now. That's right. Protected place. You're going to see a lot of them, around you, but they won't come near you, Yahweh says. Let's turn over to Psalms 90. Psalms 90, because Yahweh shows us this protected place, and He shows, if you'd keep in mind that the house of Yahweh was part of Yahweh's plan, and this is the reason that you will see it throughout the Holy Scriptures. It starts in Genesis. When Yahshua said, "You're a fool," in Luke 24:25, "You're a fool if you don't believe all that the prophets have spoken," Yahshua knew that Yahweh was guiding and protecting these Scriptures. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here for you today. Even in Martin Luther's day, it was a law, a death penalty for anyone to own a manuscript of the Bible. And if it hadn't have been protected, if Yahweh hadn't have saw to it that it was protected, it wouldn't have been here. And Martin Luther, when he rose up and said he had a bunch on his side, a bunch of Catholics on his side, he rose up and said, "I think everyone should own a Bible." Well, it might have been like it is today. He saw the money in selling Bibles. It might have been that inspired him, but nevertheless, Yahweh brought this thing about so you could have it today. And of course, the laws here in America, where we have somewhat freedom to freedom of speech. I guess you saw that, how it was brought out, the demonstrations that was a Baptist preacher had brought out, because there are a lot of people who don't like what they're seeing in the world today. They don't like sodomy being taught in their schools, and of course the Catholics are trying to push it to be taught in the schools. They're teaching it from Hollywood, making it look glamorous, I'm told. I can't stand to watch it. I don't like to vomit, you know. So I'm not going to watch it. But I'm being told that they're trying to make it look glamorous from Hollywood, and of course on the news media too. But some are still rising up against this kind of thing. So we see that Yahweh is moving this right now. And of course they sued this man and took him to court, and the Supreme Court said, no, we got freedom of speech here. Well, the Baptist is a big organization, you know, so they pay a lot of money to the Supreme Court and the government. So they're not going to stop this free speech, because Yahweh set it up. And no matter what might be the ulterior motive, it's Yahweh that's guiding this thing, and He's guiding it for His house. But here in Psalms 90 now, and Yahweh says in verse 1, Yahweh, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Well, these are the people that, of course, Yahweh was using. If you study the Scriptures and you see what I'm talking about, you'll know that there was two groups of people. There were those that hated the Galileans where Yahweh's work was being done. And of course, when the Galileans, which was Yochanan was one of them, when he went into Jerusalem and says, it's not right here what you're doing, breaking Yahweh's laws. Well, of course, they beheaded him for this, but yet it showed where Yahweh's work came from. Then Yahshua came from Galilee too. Well, that was about the only ones left in Israel that was serving Yahweh, and from there, Yahshua said, go back to Galilee and finish your work there. And He gave them peace for a certain time to establish the foundation that we have here in the book too. But we can see Yahweh doing this. He is guiding it. So we would have it today. I would have never been able to have been trained in the Scriptures if I hadn't had the Scriptures to train on when I was a child. And this was the number one thing in my life that I can see and remember, and it was an everyday thing. We had no televisions or radios when I was born. They came later in the 40s, late 40s, in when I was born in 1934, and the first thing I can remember, I think, was the Bible and my mother and dad sitting around a table with a kerosene lamp and reading the Bible of an evening. And before sundown, they would be sitting on a porch. I remember a porch on the house where they would sit and different ones would read and talk about the Scripture. So this was what I was brought up with. This was a training period that Yahweh was bringing me up, and my mother, I remember my mother really loving the Scriptures, and it was her most honored subject. When she had a quilting party with women in her area where mother taught quilting. She had racks hanging down in the quilting racks. I don't know if you've ever seen those things. There's boards with pegs in them, holes and pegs, where she kept the material tight, and she trained women to make quilts. And this was, while she was doing this, she was talking Scripture to these people. And whether I was paying attention or not, it was going in my subconscious mind. But it was something that Yahweh was drilling into me at the time to make me interested. And this, of course, has been my love now for 40 years or more. That's taken over my life, as you know, all of you know this. And of course, by this, it's Yahweh's doing, because this is how He built His house. But the dwelling place, your dwelling place, if you look on down to verse 17, may the beauty of Yahweh, our Father, be upon us. For our sake, may Yahweh establish the work of our hands. Did you get that? May Yahweh establish the work of our hands. He's talking about establishing something here. Yes, may you establish the work of our hands. Twice here. Now, if you remove the 91 there out of the way, you go right into what he was talking about, and it's a last days prophecy that is talking about protection. Protection from what we're seeing right here, from earthquakes, from nuclear bombs, from hatred, bitterness, gun toters. And it's getting worse now. So Satan is trying to bring it in, to have destruction. But I don't know if you noticed it this week, but on the news there was a shootout between two women at a 7-Eleven store. One was left dead. They caught the other one down the street. But this is what our world is coming to. Just a few weeks ago, in the streets of Abelin, there was a shootout in front of one of the Christian colleges, or close by the Christian college, that has changed their name now, so I understand, to the Warhawks. It was the Indians, and now it's taken on the name Warhawks. Why are they going to war? Well, they say Americans love war. They think they love it. They're going to find out they don't. But notice, establish His work, establish the work of our hands. And then in verse 1 of 91, he says, he who dwells in the secret place. Well, secret place. Now, why would he call it a secret place? Well, of course, if you remember, in Yeshua, in Moshe first, he hid Moshe to keep Satan from destroying Moshe. And then he hid Yeshua. And of course, no one knew where he was going to be born, but they knew that the prophets who prophesied and those who were brought up by the prophets, they knew that they knew where he was going to be born. And this word was out everywhere. I thought it would have been a great thing, and some people knew this, but I thought it would have been a great thing had the prophecies for these last days been that way. And then, the more I study, the more I see that they were. the details of Yahweh's work is extreme, and of the two witnesses, the thousands of prophecies about the two witnesses' work in these last days, which is the unified body of believers that's going to be first in the kingdom, Yahweh says. And that is a prophet. Those prophecies, brethren, are for you right now. Well, this scholars say at this verse 17, the scholars, if you've read it, they know there's something here. We know it because we have the knowledge of Yahweh, but they are guessing. But what they're saying is, the scholars say, this is a call to build again the temple. A call to build again the temple. But of course it's not. That's not, and you don't get that from if you study the prophecies. It's referring to, of course, Isaiah 2. Turn there quickly. Don't lose your place in 91. We're going to come back there. But turn to Isaiah, the second chapter. And of course, what he's saying here, to establish the work of our hands. Well, of course, these people at this time were being used by Yahweh not to work in schools of higher learning and develop empires and institutions of, training to sell stuff to China or stuff to Japan or buy stuff from Japan or China. They were working towards a kingdom, an everlasting kingdom that would rule the earth and the heavens. And when he said this, when the writer said this here in Psalms 90 and verse 17, he was talking about, and the only way you can understand it is to here a little and there a little, let the prophets tell you or the apostles tell you what this was talking about. Well, of course, in Isaiah 2, he gives this to you, said the word of Isaiah, that's verse 1, the word of Isaiah, the great prophet Isaiah, who was used extremely to write about the two witnesses in these last days. That's not all, the two witnesses go back clear to Genesis 49. But before that, it goes back to the second and third chapter of Genesis. So it's almost a beginning thing, Yahweh's plan that he would accomplish in this time period, this age that we're in right now. The word that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Yada and Jerusalem. It will come to pass in the last days or last age. If you remember the sermon I brought on that the information that the promotion, mountain, I've translated it mountain because it means uplifting, the promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief of the nations. So when he said this back here in Psalms, establish the work of our hand, these people were working to bring forth holiness that they knew would be kept track of by Yahweh. It was shown through a seven lamp burning bush that never burned up, the seven lamp lampstand, the western light that will never go out. Never go out. No, it will be used. Brethren, you're going to be used to raise the dead. And of course, that is shown throughout the Holy Scriptures too. And nobody notices it until we bring it out at the house of Yahweh. Not the most learned scholars. They struggle over this for thousands of years. But Yahweh says it's hidden from you. It's hidden. Why? Because you're wicked. No wicked will understand. Well, who's he going to teach knowledge? Remember that? Who will he teach this knowledge? Well, it's going to be to a person that's got stammering lips and a strange language to you. It's going to be a strange language. Well, what are we looking for here? So the scholars struggle some more. Well, what are you talking about now? He said, well, the one to show you, let them show you. Remember that prophecy. Who can tell this? Who will be able to tell it? Well, let these two. Well, this is what he's talking about here. This is the work. Establish the work of our hands. The last established house. Yes, the prophets wrote about it, and we're in it right now. And notice in verse 1 now of Psalms 90, because we're getting into a time of trouble, great troubles. We're just seeing it increase here to where it's severe, and the earth shifting on its axis. It's going to shift more. It'll sway like a hut, as Isaiah also said. He who dwells in the secret place. Well, now we have a secret place spoken of here. A secret place that Yahweh actually protects. The plan of Yahweh. The plan of Yahweh, the secret place. Till the end of the age. Hold your place there and turn over to Daniel, the 12th chapter, quickly. Daniel 12. And Daniel is speaking of the same thing that the Savior did, the end time prophecy, and he's seeing the two witnesses here. The same thing that Isaiah saw, and of course, the great prophet Yochanan, that is the recorder, Yochanan, who recorded the book of Revelations. But here in Daniel 12, speaking of the secret place now, let me get the correct translation here of this verse 1. He says, and at that time, one who is like Yahweh will stand up at Abel. I think David brought this out, the great Kohan Yehuda, before. He will be bringing it again this feast. And so I won't go into the details. It'd take too long to cover it here. But the authoritative books say this is the way this verse must be translated if it's correct. And it gives the words. And at that time, one who is like Yahweh will stand up at Abel. At Abel. Stand up at Abel. Yisrayl, the great priest who stands at Abel to teach Yahweh's just, perfect laws to the children of your people, and there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation to that same time, and at that time your people will be delivered, every one who will be found written in the book of life. Now, this stand up at Abel, and of course he gives it all here. Why wasn't this translated correctly? You know, the prophet Jeremiah said, you're writing it wrong. Your interpretations, you're writing it wrong here. And of course, Isaiah wrote it right. But the ones who followed him did not want this in their lives. They wanted to take Yahweh out of their life and out of their teachings. They didn't believe, as Hebrews 4 said, they were unbelievers. But they had charge. They were priests. They're the ones that say they date back to the Aaronic priesthood. They do. But they're the ones that rebelled against Moshe, against Samuel, against all the prophets. They persecuted the prophets. Which of the prophets have your fathers not persecuted? Your fathers, speaking of the ones in the temple, the violent men that had taken over the temple. Okay, here in Daniel now, he says, go to verse 2, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. Yes, you're going to awake them. You're going to have that power. Some to everlasting life, and of course some to shame and everlasting contempt. There's no two callings, no two chances given to you. If you're called now and you denied, there's no renewing to repentance, Yahweh said. That what you're going to be judged for is what you're doing right now. I hope it's not stealing tithe from the house of Yahweh, from Yahweh's work. This is the one part that Yeshua said you can judge a person on. His heart is going to be where his money is. Or you can turn that around the other way. Wherever your treasure is, there is your heart also. And of course, he said to the rich man who had all of this money that he could put in the work, he said, it's going to be very hard for a person to do this. We had a person for years, they were going to get a big settlement, and I didn't look for it. I never looked for things like that. I looked to please Yahweh and to be able to teach His Word. But praise Yahweh. But when he got the settlement, they couldn't turn loose of it, and so they left the house. And it was in my mind that this was going to take place because the family was kind of weak and shaky. They weren't never really strong for the work, to push the work. You know, I see people today, I see them walking around, like milling around. I see others. I remember setting up camp, back when I was hunting the house of Yahweh, when I was hunting the two witnesses, when I was hunting someone who could explain the prophecy. I remember going to these meetings. I would always take a place. I would start setting up chairs or tables, whatever there was to be done. I'd go to the leader and I'd say, what do we got to do here? Tell me what we got to do. Then I'd start to work and people would come to me and say, what do you want me to do? Well, ask him, not me. Well, I looked around and he is gone. So here, get over here to help me then. But when you're doing these things, you're a part of the work. Well, right now, I would do anything for this because I know this is Yahweh's work. I know that other wasn't, but it was a training period. But these people that were working here in Psalms 90, you know, they knew that this was the work of Yahweh and that it's going to be a long time in coming. And of course, every prophet did. And the prophet Daniel, if you could think the position he was in, then Yahweh tells him, close the books. It's for another time period. And he was seeing all these visions, and no wonder he was so troubled about it, because Yahweh wouldn't reveal it to him either. Well, here now, he said, verse 2, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. He's showing Daniel this. And Daniel's writing it for us, some to everlasting life and some to shame and contempt. And those who are wise will shine as the brightness of heaven. Those who are wise, if you could preach several sermons on that word right there, but it's the ones that become as little children and start a training period, a very humble training period, to where, like Yeshua says, he called for the little child, and the child came. He didn't disobey. He came, and Yeshua set him in the midst. In the midst. He obeyed Yeshua. Well, of course, he said, you've got to be just like this. And this is what they're talking about here. Yeshua adds to it. He's the foundation stone of every work that we're doing right now. Yeshua is that foundation stone for us. Well, verse 3 now. And those who are wise are the ones who will submit to doing what he said. It's like the one who is wise is like a man who digs down deep and finds the foundation and stays there on it. Builds his house on it. Praise Yahweh. And those who are wise will shine as the brightness of the heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness, to keeping Yahweh's laws as the stars forever. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book till the time of the end. Many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased. Yes, we do have great knowledge now. Abundance of knowledge, very little understanding, but abundance of knowledge. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood two others. Well, this was the future work that he is speaking of here. This is the end of the age, the plan of Yahweh that Psalms 91 is talking about, and it's secret. It's all kept secret. And when he said, shut the words, shut the books, he means it's closed. You're not going to understand it. And Yeshua said, even the Malachim have tried to understand this and can't. What's going into your ears right now in this age, brethren, is things that was sought after by scholars for thousands of years now and couldn't understand it. Praise Yahweh. Well, he looked and he saw these two others, two witnesses that he saw here, and one on one side of the river, bank of the river, and I'll elaborate on this later. It'd take 2 sermons at least to cover this part right here. So I will elaborate coming up to it, maybe by the feast, I hope. And then they asked one who was clothed in linen, how long will it be till the end? So one is going to be there till the very end, if you'll see what he's saying here. And I heard the man clothed in linen then speaking. And he tells you some things here that are given in other prophecies that you must look for in order to understand this. In verse 8, so I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my ruler, what will be the end? Verse 9, but he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed and sealed till the time of the end. Closed and sealed, the secret place. What we're speaking of back here in Psalms 91 that we will go back to in just a second. Many will be purified and made white. This is a work, brethren, a hard work. Do you know how hard it is and how long that we have worked to do what we're doing right now? We're the last report, we're in all but 12 countries out of 195. Think of the work that this takes to do this. It didn't come overnight, but we've been building up to that for all of this time period. As Revelation showed, when we thought we had all the witnessing done, man, I'd visited every dignitary in the entire world, all the ones that run the show. And then Yahweh says, well, now you got to prophesy again. This is in Revelation. After we'd already done this work, and then Yahweh said, well, now you got to go and prophesy again to all these multitudes, kingdoms, and tongues, everybody. So here is another work set before us that we're now doing, of course, and we're going to reach every one of those because Yahweh shows that. Praise Yahweh. Well, he said, many will be purified and made white by this work. The work. I looked and I saw 2 others, and from that work, wars will stop and never be learned again. The people will be converted and they will be saying, let us go up and learn Yahweh's way. It's here with these 2 others. 2 others. At Abel. And you know that word at Abel. It's there. The scholars say it never should have been removed. Of course, that's what they say about the name. But how many is putting it back? Not anyone that I know of except the House of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Many will be purified and made white, but the wicked will do wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand. But the wise, now, they will understand. Let's go back to Psalms again now, 91. The secret place, the shadow, the secret place, the place that is kept secret. These 2 people that Daniel spoke of here in chapter 12, the 2 witnesses, nobody knew this. All they could get to was Revelations 11, and that was so confusing they didn't know what to do. Do you know how much work it took for us to translate the book of Yahweh? How many years that we put into the work there, and the books that we brought out, the books, I don't know how many books we got in trying to explain what took place. And then Yahweh, too, He furnished us with some ancient books and access to ancient books. It's now been closed off where nobody can see them, they said. But we used them in translating this book of Yahweh. And people got to seeing this, and they got to calling ACU to see if they actually had those books. I said, yes, but we closed them off now, and they're old and they're brittle, and we don't want people using them anymore. So that's been shut up to them. But we were allowed to use it before. Then we had people that were living in other places, and they bought books for us and brought here that we could use also and have been using. And this is how we get these translations from authoritative books that have been probably some of them even destroyed now. I would say that some of the copies that we have are probably the last on earth, because Satan, I told you she was angry. She wants to destroy everything that Yahweh created. That's her attitude right now. Well, the secret place, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow. The shadow, my time is up, but this shadow, we're going to continue this for at least one more sermon to cover it. But this shadow is protection, as Yahweh shows, from things like this earthquake. That's the reason Abelin was created like it is. You know that when Yahweh created the earth, he had Abel in mind. The least likely place on the face of the earth for an earthquake is right here. You can look that up. We got books for you if you want to see it. Studies have been made. It came out in Abelin Reporter News. They didn't know what it meant. Why would he create the earth with Abel being protected like it is right now? Well, now we know, right? May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to I love you.